Programming on WTTW is made possible in part by viewers like you and by the following.
It started with a crown, then a bridge, then dentures. But you kept losing teeth and keeping pain. Dental implants are a permanent, custom-made answer to decay and loss. The closest thing to having your real teeth. Eon Clinics keeps the entire process under one roof, with a team that works together to make you feel at home so you can have more to give to the people you love.
In 1945, Walter Smith Sr. opened a family business in his name. 4 generations in, and the Smith family remains committed to the ideals he set forth. Offer furniture for all Chicagoans, including a variety of styles and price points, and provide service to all who enter our doors, including in-store and in-home design assistance. We look forward to welcoming you into the Smith family, just as we have since 1945.
It's very important that everybody that can take the vaccine, take the vaccine.
This vaccine has already started to curb the number of deaths that have occurred.
It's incredible, the number of diseases we've been able to prevent because of vaccines.
WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center.
I've always wanted to know where we came from.
Talk show host Michael Strahan.
Unreal.
Actor S.E. Pather Murkison.
I'm blown away.
Family history.
It's unfathomable.
Severed by slavery.
They have names.
Finding your roots.
Tuesday at 8 on WTTW.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight.
You know, I've heard enough about Rob Blagojevich.
The only Illinois governor to be impeached goes to court seeking the ability to run for office once again.
Understanding how COVID-19 affects people's smell and taste. A neurobiologist shares some new research.
And the friends decide they will share the celebration.
A U.S. Olympic team doctor on some of his favorite moments from the Tokyo Games and his thoughts on the mental pressures for today's athletes.
It was 10 minutes of thunderous, apocalyptic sounds.
Residents say they are fed up with caravans of motorcycles and off-road vehicles causing havoc across the city.
We're repealing Illinois' archaic HIV criminalization law.
Reaction from advocates in Illinois who work toward this repeal.
Amazon customers in Chicago shopping at Whole Foods will face a fee for delivered groceries. That and more from Cranes.
An exit interview with a Chicago commissioner with a 30-year career in city government.
Perfect for a visual learner, perfect for a person who has to see it.
And meet a local calligrapher using her passion to help businesses develop their brands. But first, some of today's top stories. 8 people were killed and 51 were shot over the weekend. But with violence metrics up 10% from last month, Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown focused on the increase in guns recovered today.
We are on a pace to be above 12,000 guns recovered in this city, which would be an historic high, which you should not be running in place as far as homicides, and you should not be up 10% with the pace of the work that the men and women of the Chicago Police Department have done in recovering guns.
The superintendent continues to blame the courts for releasing criminals to home monitoring for the upswing in violence. Crews dove into Lollapalooz's mosh pit for cleanup today. Cleanup will take some time after the 4-day music fest. Event organizers estimate an average of about 100,000 attendees per day, with only 19 people arrested for trying to get in for free. Governor J.B. Pritzker chose to skip the event over concerns with the surge in the more contagious Delta variant of COVID-19.
People like me who, got up to near the date and decided, you know what, I'd rather not go, just out of an abundance of caution. So there's no mixed message, I think.
Mayor Lori Lightfoot and the city's public health commissioner are defending their decision to let the festival proceed, as critics decry it as a possible super spreader event. Meanwhile, health officials are closely watching COVID-19 data in the wake of Lollapalooza and urging indoor masking and vaccines. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is reporting the national daily COVID case average of more than 72,000. That surpasses the peak seen last summer before the U.S. had a COVID-19 vaccine. Here in Illinois, test positivity rate, it's up to 4.9%, the highest it's been since April. And before Lollapalooza started, Illinois hospitalizations jumped 35% in 1 week. The city, state, and CDC are all recommending masking indoors for both the vaccinated and unvaccinated. The federal eviction moratorium has ended. Now, housing activists fear the looming specter of mass evictions. Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle says there is a free program offering mediation between landlords and tenants to avoid eviction proceedings. President Joe Biden says only Congress can extend the freeze on evictions after the Supreme Court ruled the CDC overstepped its authority by creating the policy. Eviction judgments can be enforced starting September 1st. Up next, former Governor Rod Blagojevich is back in the news. Stay with us to hear about his lawsuit.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Former Illinois Governor Rod Blagojevich spent this afternoon at a place he came to know very well, the Dirksen Federal Courthouse. But this time it was by choice. He's taking legal action against the state. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda, why is he back in court?
Harris, you know, you make an important distinction there. It is by choice. Also, this time he was alone. The last time he was at the courthouse, it was with a phalanx of attorneys, onlookers, journalists too. And that was, of course, when he was convicted of a series of corruption charges, including attempted extortion and conspiracy to commit bribes.
I've never had much luck in this building to begin with, but I'm going to try. There are significant constitutional issues involved here. Issues like the weaponization and the politicization of prosecution and impeachment, and the criminalization of the necessary legal and routine practices that take place in government and politics all the time.
Now, Blagojevich spent nearly 8 years in prison, that is up until February of 2020, when then President Donald Trump commuted his sentence. Now, the complaint that Blagojevich self-filed this afternoon would allow him to return to his previous occupation, that of politician. Blagojevich isn't really seeking to lift his criminal convictions, though he denies any wrongdoing. Rather, he's seeking to essentially overturn part of what happened in 2009 in Springfield, when legislators impeached and removed him from office. And at that time, the Illinois Senate also took a vote saying that Blagojevich could never again run for state or local office in the state of Illinois. It's that ban that Blagojevich now wants lifted. His complaint alleges that preventing him from running outweighs any harm that could be caused by denying the voters the right to vote for or against him in a free election. House GOP leader Jim Durkin was the top Republican on the Special House Investigative Committee that impeached Blagojevich back in 2009, an action that he says Blagojevich deserved for repeatedly putting up the office of governor for sale.
Whether it was selling the U.S. Senate seat, shaking down hospital executives, forcing a pay-to-play operation with legislation, the list goes on. And he was convicted. His convictions were upheld by the appellate court, the Supreme Court. And, you know, I've heard enough about Rod Blagojevich.
But Blagojevich is back now, alleging that he wasn't allowed to call during those impeachment proceedings all relevant witnesses, nor, he says, was he given the opportunity to present all evidence, including an airing of FBI wiretaps of his conversations that, by the way, still remain secret. Now, Durkin calls those allegations an outright lie.
You can't complain about lack of process when you don't participate. So he waived every right that he is now claiming that he was denied.
I called former federal prosecutor Jeff Kramer for his legal take.
Now, this is interesting. What he says, he wasn't able to call certain witnesses and therefore was denied due process of law. And if it was in a court of law, if it was in the federal Dirksen building, that would be a good argument because, as we all know, defendants have the right to call witnesses. However, this was not a criminal proceeding. It was not a legal proceeding. It was a political decision.
And an impeachment is inherently a political process. Kramer says it will be an uphill battle for Blagojevich. Still, he says, there may be a path for the former governor.
If there was a political system that said certain people can't run for office, we would all say, well, that's outrageous. It denies somebody their due process. So there is a certain level where it reaches a federal, civil rights violation, if you will, or due process right, which is basically what he's arguing.
Now, if Blagojevich is successful in this civil rights complaint, the question of whether voters would ever take him back is another one entirely. Blagojevich says he is running, well, as in jogging. He's long been a jogger, but he is not ruling out running for office in the future, though he says he has no particular plans to do so.
I have no plans to run for any particular office. The idea of doing all that again is really is a kind of an unhappy thought in many ways because it's a hard business and it's hard on your family. What happened to my family has been very difficult. So it's not that I have any specific plans. However, I'm not going to rule out any options either. I feel like I was a great governor for the people. I did things for people.
But Durkin says he stands by the previous General Assembly's action, saying that they went out of their way, yes, to dot their I's and cross their T's with the impeachment process, but also to protect future Illinoisans from Blagojevich.
We thought it was a good idea. I mean, we have, Illinois has a long history of corruption at the highest levels with governors. And we are now, we passed a law back then in which we finally said enough's enough, that and we were worried about a guy like Rod Blagojevich, who's so driven and has such an egomaniac that he would continue to fight his conviction.
Durkin says that Blagojevich is and always was a showman, and he suspects that this is just another way for the former governor to get back in the limelight after maybe some of the media attention has worn off. And that may well be what this is all about. ABC had a lot of cameras at this afternoon's press conference outside that Dirksen federal courthouse, and a crew member said that that is anticipation of a documentary on Blagojevich set to air this fall. And well, this gives them some extra footage and content. Harris, back to you.
All right, Amanda, it appears the former governor returning to his publicity-seeking ways. Thank you very much. And now to Brandis and a check-in on the Tokyo Olympics from Tokyo. Brandis.
In Paris, in the context of a deadly global pandemic and surging coronavirus cases in Japan, the decision to have the Olympic Games in Tokyo this summer has been questioned by many. But even with Japan's capital under its 4th state of emergency and spectators banned from the stadiums, the Games have gone ahead. Joining us now from Tokyo to give us his impression of the Games so far is Dr. Mark Hutchinson, one of the leading doctors for the U.S. Olympic team. Hutchinson is professor of orthopedics and sports medicine at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And thank you for joining us, Dr. Hutchinson, because I know it's an early morning in Tokyo as you're speaking to us. Thank you. So before we get to some of the Olympic action, give us your sense of the atmosphere in Japan. What does it feel like to be at these games right now?
Well, it's a very different experience than Rio because of COVID. We wear our masks everywhere, and there's certainly less interactive socialization. We're careful about where we're driving. But I think with the Japanese have done very well at the games, I think the Japanese populations and their opinions have actually improved. There was some concern early, but I think that they're very proud of their accomplishments.
What would you say the experience has been like for the athletes? Is it strange for them to compete in an empty stadium? Has that diminished the experience for some of them?
Well, I think it's mixed. I think most of the athletes have gotten used to that over the last year and a half during COVID. And so, yes, it's different. It's not the same Olympic experience, but they are representing their country at the Olympic Games. Once they're done here, they are Olympians for life. And so it's still an amazing experience for them.
Now, despite, not having the crowds, there's still been, some very special Olympic moments as the, Olympics is able to create. And one of them was the way the men's high jump concluded. Explain why that was so unusual and so special.
Well, I look for the Olympic moments throughout the games. And you saw the athletes, Mataz Barshim from Qatar and Gianmarco Tamberi from Italy, who basically tied. And then they moved up the ladder to try to hit the higher number, and both of them couldn't make it. So then the decision was either to have a jump off, which means somebody wouldn't go. And I think it was Barshim that approached the judges and asked, is it possible just to share the gold? And they said, well, absolutely it is. And so then it was this wonderful global celebration of what the Olympics really are about. Is this safe and competition between people and coming together through sport. And so it was really an amazing Olympic moment.
And I think the two of them are good friends. So if you're going to share a gold, you want it to be with a friend, right?
Absolutely. All of these networks tend to be small. So these guys have been jumping versus each other for a long time. They are close friends and supportive of each other. So it was a really cool event, and it was cool to watch them, share the podium and share the flag walking around the track. It was really impressive.
And there's also been, for Michaela Skinner, sort of an unlikely path for her. She is a gymnast, and she won the silver, actually, after she stepped in to replace Simone Biles in the vault competition. What makes that so special to you? Because I think, we often make the mistake of only focusing on the gold medal winners, but silver, it's nothing to sneeze at.
Oh my gosh, Michaela and the entire gymnastics team who said, oops, there's a tough moment here, we have to step up. It's what teams do. And then for Michaela, she's really had a tough road. She some people would say was left out of opportunities in the past. She kept on it herself, her dedication to sport, her dedication to success, and the dedication to the Olympic movement to give her Olympic opportunity. And then I think it was Simone who actually called her and said, hey, do not leave. We may need you to stick around. She stuck around, and then you see this wonderful American success. It was just wonderful to see.
Now, of course, she wouldn't have been competing in the vault had it not been for Simone Biles' decision to withdraw from that competition. It's led some folks to criticize her, saying that she needed to prioritize her mental health. And she explained that she has a condition of what gymnasts call the twisties, and you've worked with gymnastics teams before. It sounds like a cute name for something, but it's actually serious. What are the twisties?
Well, it's for her probably worse than anybody else in the world. If you get disoriented while you're up in the air doing flips and you don't know where to land, she could land on her neck. And then we would all go, oh, who let her jump? She's just so amazing that she knows her body so well, and that she knows that she was off and that the team would be better not having her make a mistake or get injured. And so I'm just excited for Simone that hopefully she's feeling some better and is going to be able to compete to everything she's capable of, because she is the greatest greatest gymnast of all time in terms of it's just been proven. So I'd love to see her final performance show that.
Yeah, and she's supposed to be competing on the beam on Tuesday. But of course, there's been a lot of discussion about mental health for athletes in particular. Not the first time this has come up around athletes in the last month or so. Talk a little bit about the mental pressure that they face and how it can impact their ability to compete, but also just their lives and their health.
Well, huge stresses. I mean, I think we as fans and the press put so much stress on them, and they put pressure on themselves to succeed. And so it is difficult. And you're talking about probably the biggest stage in the world at the Olympic Games. But the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee has done amazingly well. Now, I've watched them for 20 years. This year, they have mental health officers. They have access points. They're screening basically every day. How you doing? How you feeling? Do you need anything? And really, the intensity of focus on mental health for our American athletes is amazing. It's uniquely different this year. It's really a step up and a credit to the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee.
I'm sure that's positive to hear, especially for the athletes. We'll have to leave it there. Dr. Mark Hutchinson joining us there from Tokyo. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much, Brandis.
And now back to Paris for a look at an excessive amount of motorcycle noise that's been building over the past year. Paris.
Brandis, it's almost like a scene from an apocalyptic movie. Caravans of motorcycle riders or riders of off-road vehicles speeding down city streets on an almost nightly basis, blasting loud music, performing tricks, and causing havoc. Residents in and around downtown neighborhoods describe a noisy problem that has been festering for a year and one that seemed to hit a fever pitch over the weekend. But are law enforcement officials listening? Lollapalooza wasn't the only event that raised the decibel levels downtown this weekend. Caravans of motorcycle riders were all over the city, performing stunts and making screechingly loud noise.
I've lived in the neighborhood for 20 years, and I've never heard the noise level to this extent before.
South Michigan Avenue resident Alan Ruffin says the problem has become almost a daily occurrence. He says he's witnessed drag racing, wheelies, and other stunts along Michigan and Roosevelt roads.
I'm on the 13th floor of my building, and it will drown out. It'll drown out my radio. It'll drown out my television. It's that loud.
It begins in the 9 to 10 o'clock hour and goes on till 2 or 3 a.m. It used to be a little more isolated on just the weekends. Now, however, we're actually hearing this during the week as well.
James Levine lives off of Wabash in the South Loop. He pointed us to skid marks in his intersection. Odds are, if you live anywhere in the city these days, you've seen them taking over the streets. The groups usually organize via social media and attract riders from the city, suburbs, and over the border in Indiana and Wisconsin. Here, cell phone video caught hordes of them traveling down the Eisenhower. DuSable Lakeshore Drive has also been a favored destination, but the problem has matriculated into the neighborhoods. This was the scene last week at Halsted and Fullerton. This weekend, the intersection of Belmont and Sheffield is blocked off so a car can perform donuts. And Lower Wacker Drive has been a regular hotbed of activity.
It sounds like you're being taken over by some foreign force or something. We've never, ever had anything like this, and apparently nothing is being done to stop it.
Deborah Gershbein is the president of Streeterville Organization of Active Residents, or SOAR. She and other residents we spoke with all say law enforcement isn't stepping in.
There are no consequences at this point, and until the city comes up with consequences for criminal activity, what's going to stop these people from repeating these actions? Second Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins says the caravans are lawless, but law enforcement's hands are tied.
They're violating so many different parts of the vehicle code at any one moment. It isn't necessarily that we need more laws on the books. We need to be more effective at enforcing the laws we already have on the books.
Hopkins says there are video and audio scanners that detect the activity, but it's hard for police to go after the riders because chases can turn deadly. He says City Council might have to pass an ordinance to go after the body shops that soup up these vehicles.
Almost every one of them has an illegally modified vehicle that is not street legal and shouldn't be driving on the public way.
Like with homicides, Police Superintendent David Brown lays much of the blame on the court system, saying he believes there are too few consequences for offenders.
We do what we can in citing and arresting them when appropriate, but it is the courts that don't, low-level crimes are just not a thing of any significant consequence in our courts. The revolving door spins very quickly for traffic violations, if it moves at all.
Little comfort to residents who say the problem is making their neighborhoods unlivable.
Moving is definitely a consideration at this point, if nothing can be done to curb this.
And we reached out to one of the larger groups on Facebook called Chicago United Riders, but we received no response. And that group regularly posts videos of their rides through the city and even promotes something that they call Taco Tuesday, which is a regular Tuesday night ride that they certainly look forward to, but downtown residents certainly do not, Brandis.
Taco Tuesdays is code for riding. So,
right.
So we heard, Alderman Brian Hopkins just say this, but aldermen say these riders are likely breaking multiple laws. What might some of them be?
Well, first of all, there's a noise ordinance, so you can't go above a certain decibel level with your radios or boom boxes in the city. They're certainly violating that with the noise coming from their automobiles. And then these modified or removed mufflers on the motorcycles and on these little three-wheel cars and four-wheel cars. Those are illegal via state law and city law. And then, there's video circulating of a purported event that happened this weekend where the motorcycle caught fire. A guy doing a wheelie, the thing caught fire, people were injured. So it's a public safety threat as well.
Okay, Paris, thank you so much. Up next, how advocates say a repeal of the HIV criminalization law affects the LGBTQ+ community. Stay with us. People with HIV can no longer be criminally prosecuted for exposing someone else to the virus without their knowledge. This makes Illinois the second state to repeal such a law, this one from the 1980s, making HIV exposure a felony. Advocates say the law discouraged testing and treatment for HIV and that this repeal is long overdue. Joining us now with more are Timothy Jackson, the Director of Government Relations with the AIDS Foundation Chicago and the lead lobbyist of the bill's repeal, and State Representative Carol Amons, a Democrat who sponsored the bill. Thanks to you both for joining us. So, Timothy, let's start with you, please. What was your reaction to the governor officially signing this bill last week?
Thank you so much for having us. Emotions were all over the place, to be completely honest with you. As a person living with HIV for nearly 12 years, there was anxiety, there was joy. There were a couple of tears, but mostly it was really a weight lifted off of my shoulders and for shoulders of people living with HIV across Illinois, that they won't have to worry about their health condition being weaponized against them. And so for that, I am eternally grateful to Representative Ammons and Senator Peters and Governor Pritzker and others for their work in advancing the legislation.
And Representative Amons, why did you want to be a part of this legislation?
I think Timothy really expressed that, and thank you so much for having me on about this bill. This bill really reflects something that shouldn't have been on the books in the first place, but we needed to correct the wrong of the historical record when it came to people living with HIV. And so I wanted to be a part of that. I have a long legislative record of criminal justice reform. And I found this to be not just criminal justice reform, but this is also healthcare justice in the face of COVID. And so I think it was high time that Illinois took the lead on this initiative. And I'm so happy that we got it signed last week and that the governor saw the importance of this legislation.
And Timothy, how did this particular law and laws like it, how do they impact people who are living with HIV?
Yeah, there are a number of different harms, of which one, it's not based on current science, because right now there's a thing called U equals U, which stands for undetectable equals untransmittable, which means a person living with HIV with an undetectable viral load, they pose zero risk in transmitting the virus. And so obviously that is a huge boon for people living with HIV. We understand that it's overly harsh and discriminatory to the same communities that are already ravaged by HIV, Black, Latinx, Indigenous, and LGBTQ communities. But more than all of those is it inflicts harm and also stands in the way of public health strategies, because a person couldn't have been charged with this law if they didn't know they had HIV. And so people literally told us, well, I'm not going to get tested for HIV because I can be charged with this crime. And so obviously we understand that stands in complete contrast to what we want to happen. We want to encourage people to get tested and get into treatment. And so having something on the books that stood in the way of us doing that was obviously a huge barrier to ending the HIV epidemic here in Illinois.
And let's get into a little bit of that. An analysis of Cook County Court data by the circuit shows that Black men make up more than 2/3 of the people charged under this law, and across gender lines, 75% of those charged are Black, and that's the circuit. That also comes from the Chicago Reader. Timothy, why have Black people been disproportionately impacted by this law?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really just another example of systemic racism. I think Representative Ammons highlighted that not only is this a criminal justice issue, this is a healthcare justice issue as well. And it's something that we have really seen where you have disproportionate impact in a number of different areas. There is not just Chicago or Cook County centered. 1 out of every 2 gay Black men in this country will contract HIV in their lifetime, based on the CDC. 50%. And just to kind of put it into, just really broader terms, you're looking at that statistic. I am a gay Black man living with HIV. And so that just really kind of puts into into kind of focus of the importance of making sure that we remove this law and that we really focus on education, prevention, and treatment, not only in the Black community, but Latinx community and others as well. And
Timothy, you've said that, to your knowledge, no one is currently in prison for this law, but there's some other data from Cook County that says that from 1990 to 2016, 60 people were charged. Representative Ammons, what does that say to you about this law? The number of people who've been charged, the number of people who've been imprisoned?
This really tells me that we are on the right track. If we know that 50%, that includes my own family members, my own son, I want to make sure that he has every opportunity afforded to him to get good quality health care, and to not, in the event that he may contract HIV, or my daughter for that matter could contract HIV, or a child who could be born with it. We want to make sure that we don't have laws on the books that deny them their actual rights, as well as protecting their health status. It leads to unemployment, socioeconomic condition status changes, discrimination. We don't want that to be the outcome for a person who in reality has a health issue that really just need addressing. And so that's why this was so important, to remove the stigma and remove the discrimination and remove the criminalization for people who are living with HIV in our state.
All right, and that's where we'll have to leave it. My thanks to Timothy Jackson and Representative Ammons for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
And now, Paris, we'll go back to you.
All right, thanks, Brandis. And still to come on Chicago Tonight, new life in the old Marshall Fields building. Who's the new tenant sharing office space above Macy's? That and more from Cranes. A lead neurobiologist shares his findings behind the mystery of COVID-19's toll on smell and taste. Chicago's mayors have been known for their strong personalities, so what's it been like working with them over the last 30 years? An outgoing city commissioner shares her thoughts. And arts correspondent Angel Ito introduces us to the concept of mind mapping. That's vision boarding with a twist. But first, some more of today's top stories. Governor J.B. Pritzker signs a bill modernizing gun sales in the state. The law requires universal background checks on all gun sales in Illinois. The governor says the licensing system had been antiquated and hadn't seen significant updates in more than 50 years.
It isn't everything that gun safety advocates wanted. It isn't everything that those who are, support the Illinois State Rifle Association and other organizations wanted. But this was the right way forward. And again, progress has been made.
The 3,000-page federal infrastructure bill is now heading to negotiations in the Senate. Despite its bipartisan beginning, not all lawmakers say they're sold on the details just yet. Here's what leaders on both sides of the aisle had to say about it being approved before the August recess.
We need consent from our Republican colleagues to start the amendment process, and we await their answer. I hope we can use our time in the Senate efficiently. Let's start voting on amendments. The longer it takes to finish the bill, the longer we'll be here.
Our full consideration of this bill must not be choked off by any artificial timetable that our Democratic colleagues may have penciled out for political purposes.
Cub fans, no doubt, are still reeling from the club's trading of its core superstars and making it tougher to swallow. Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, and Javier Baez all hit home runs in their first game for their new teams. Oy. Cubs chairman Tom Ricketts sent a letter to season ticket holders. It reads in part, quote, "The past week has been extremely hard for everyone, especially our team and our fans. While we believe the decisions we took were right for our organization, they were nonetheless difficult to make. As we reset our team, please know we share your higher expectations. We're focused on replenishing our farm system and reloading our roster to build our next great Cubs team. Your support is critical to our success." It only took 110 or so years to build the last great Cubs team. And now to Brandis for some of today's top business headlines. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. Amazon customers who shop at Whole Foods now face a fee for delivery. A new residential tower in the Loop drops its condos and goes all rental, and new life in the old Marshall Field building. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane Chicago business editor Ann Dwyer. Ann, good to see you as always. So, world's largest retailer is adding a delivery fee for Prime members shopping at Whole Foods in Chicago and some other cities. How big a fee are we talking about, and what does this say about grocery delivery across the country?
Well, we're talking about a delivery fee of $9.95 per order, Brandis, and this really underscores just how competitive and difficult the grocery e-commerce game is right now. Even if you are, like Amazon, the biggest retail colossus that anyone ever imagined, Chicago is just one of a handful of cities. A few others include Boston and Portland, Maine, where they're going to be rolling out this charge starting August 30th. Now, this is a turnaround from the time just after Amazon bought Whole Foods, when the company eliminated the $14.99 a month charge for grocery delivery and sold that as a perk for Amazon Prime members. You could get free grocery delivery. Well, this rollout, I think, really is a very strong sign that free delivery may not be sustainable for Whole Foods, even though a company's spokesperson does emphasize that this is just a pilot program at the moment.
Okay, and the Parkline residential tower in the Loop was built as a combination of condos and apartments, but now it is switching to all rental. What does this tell us about the real estate market right now, Ann?
Well, it tells us that demand for apartments is still red hot, even in the Loop, but that taking the temperature of the condo market right now, Brandis, is a much trickier affair. Now, the dozen or so condos that are being marketed at this property, Parkline, actually right next door to my offices here at Randolph, just off Michigan Avenue, were offered at an average of $711 a square foot. Condo buyers have been paying a lot less than that for downtown condos right now. And meanwhile, the apartment portion of this project is 98% leased. So the building owners are going to try now to rent those condo units instead. And you can get into one, Brandis, if you can scrounge up $9,000 a month.
$9,000 a month. I'll just write them a check. So lastly, the old Marshall Fields building, before we let you go, on State Street, getting a new tenant. What can you tell us about that company briefly?
The company is called Industrious. They're a co-working company, kind of a competitor to WeWork. They are close to signing a deal to take 50,000 square feet of space in the newly renovated office portion of the old Marshall Fields building on State Street. Now, Industrious is going to occupy just a slice of that $650,000 square foot project. But the company that's doing the refurbishment, Brookfield Properties, which now owns that entire building, is really hoping that getting Industrious on board as its second tenant will help to attract other tenants to that radical rethinking of the space at this historic landmark building.
Yeah, it's an interesting reuse. Ann Dwyer at Cranes, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Brandis.
And now, Paris, back to you.
Thanks, Brandis. Over a year into the COVID-19 pandemic and still so many unknowns about the virus. Among these, the mystery symptom of losing the senses of smell and taste. And joining us to discuss his research findings on how the virus is affecting those things is Dr. Sandeep Robert Datta, professor of neurobiology at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Datta, thank you so much for being here. So you led a team that researched why these symptoms persist in so many COVID-19 patients. What did you find?
Yes, so we were really curious, I think like many people, how it is that this virus attacks your sense of smell and your sense of taste. And so together with a large team of international collaborators, we kind of probed the cells in your nose that are responsible for allowing you to smell. And through our research, we were able to propose one possible way that we think this virus is causing many of the people who get infected with the virus to lose their sense of smell.
All right, for the layperson, explain what that one possible way is.
Sure. So smells, odors, they're really chemicals that are floating through the air. And when you take a sniff into your nose, you inhale a bunch of these chemicals into your nose, and they travel to the back of your nose where there's a specialized tissue called the olfactory epithelium. And the olfactory epithelium has a bunch of different types of cells within it. One of the most important type of cell that lives in your olfactory epithelium is called a neuron. And these are neurons, just like the neurons in your you think, but they don't live in your brain. They live actually inside of your nose, and they have little sensors that interact with chemicals that you're breathing in and sniffing through your nose. And when these neurons interact with odors, they send electrical signals to your brain that tells your brain what it is exactly you're smelling. Now, these neurons are really fragile, and they're surrounded by lots of cells called support cells that basically kind of physically support these neurons, help them stand up. They offer the neurons energy, and they make sure the ion balance around the cell is perfect. And these support cells are also essential for your sense of smell. And what we proposed in our research is that the virus is likely to act to cause you to lose your sense of smell by primarily infecting these support cells. And in work that's been done since the time my lab kind of got into this problem, from human patients, it seems pretty clear that this virus attacks the support cells in your nose, and in doing so causes most patients that have COVID to have some degree of smell loss.
And most patients do recover that smell and taste loss, but some have experienced this for 6 months or more, even a year. Has your research discovered anything into those cases?
Yeah, so again, as with everything in this pandemic, we're kind of learning as we go. What we think is that there are basically two kinds of patients. In the first kind, they get infected, these support cells get infected, there's a lot of inflammation, and that temporarily shuts down your sense of smell. And when you clear the virus and the inflammation goes away, the cells get better, the support cells get better, and then you can smell again. But in some patients, we think that the fact that these support cells get infected really causes damage to this olfactory epithelium, and actually might cause some of the neurons in your nose to die. And one of the very special things about the olfactory epithelium is that the neurons inside the epithelium can actually regenerate. They can regrow and rewire into your brain, but that takes time. And so we think that in some patients, they get infected with the virus and they lose the neurons that are responsible for your sense of smell, and those have to be rebuilt. And so that can often take months. And in some cases, we know now the pandemic has gone on, it can take more than a year.
They need to be rebuilt. And do patients actually have to do work to do that? And I bring this up because I'm sure you're aware, esteemed Harvard neurobiologist, of this video on social media of putting an orange on your burner and burning it, and then putting brown sugar on it, and poof, problem solved. I mean, any merit to this at all? And if not, is there a way to rebuild those neurons for patients that are experiencing these symptoms?
Yeah, I too was excited when I saw that video. It definitely circulated around my colleagues. Unfortunately, as far as I know, there's no scientific evidence that you can regain your sense of smell by just briefly smelling a burnt orange. There is some evidence for something called smell therapy, where you get some common smells that are pretty strong, things like peppermint oil or maybe cloves, and a couple times a day, you smell them and you tell yourself what they are. And it's thought through mechanisms we don't really understand that this experience with familiar smells repeatedly might improve the rate at which you recover. And there is actually some clinical evidence, although it's not very strong, there is some evidence that supports that as a strategy to help people with long-term loss of their sense of smell perhaps recover more quickly.
All right, Dr. Sandeep Datta, very interesting research, a lot that you and your team are still discovering about this very strange but pervasive symptom for COVID-19. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And up next, WBEZ reporter and guest host of Saturday's Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, Michael Puente. He has an exit interview with a 30-year city government veteran. But first, we take a look at the weather.
Last week, the city slapped two big companies with nearly $1 million in restitution and fines for violating the city's sick leave law. Oreo maker Mondelez International and Tri-City Foods, owner of dozens of Burger King franchises. That effort was one of the final official acts for the Commissioner of Chicago's Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, which is charged with making sure businesses are licensed and following the law, and protecting consumers from fraud. Joining us now is the outgoing Commissioner of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, Rosa Escarino. Rosa, welcome to Latino Voices.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for having me.
As we just mentioned, the city just landed a major payout from two companies for violating workers' sick leave protections. Expect we'll see more settlements like this in the years to come?
Well, we hope not, but the goal for us is to ensure that the employers across Chicago abide by Chicago's labor laws. And we do a lot of work up front to make sure that we're working with employers and businesses across the city so that they fully understand. Our goal is not to be punitive. Our goal is to ensure that all these great policies that are really helping workers and helping our economy are basically, they're abided by.
Right. Before we get into more labor issues, for folks who don't know your story, your mother brought you and your siblings here at a young age. What prompted the move?
Well, my father actually had been a farm worker a few years in the United States, and upon his return on one of his visits, he passed away of an illness. And so my mother was left with a very difficult decision, and so chose, as my father had always wanted, us to actually come to the United States. So his death, unfortunately, is what triggered that move. But my mom was a widowed mother at that time with 6 children. My brother was 6 months, the youngest, and I was a child at the time. And that's what prompted us to come here, really searching for a better life, just like my father knew that his work in the farm world, and then eventually also worked in a couple of factories here in the United States. It's really what brought us here.
Rosa, did your mother inspire any of the work you've done?
Absolutely. I've been so privileged to be in the role of public servant. And I think throughout my years, it's always been about how do we give back. But specifically when we created the Office of Labor Standards late in 2018 and going into 2019, I've always thought about my mom. She would wake up really early in the morning, have to be at work by 5 a.m. And did that for years, standing up for about 30 years. And so every time I go into my work, specifically around establishing policy, drafting legislation, everything dealing with workers, not just my mom's story, but my mom's story is replicated thousands and thousands of times. We saw a lot of this, Michael, around the pandemic with our essential workers having to leave their families behind, putting themselves at risk so that they could really keep our city open. But their inspiration is their family. So I think this is the connection that I see when I'm in the position to help workers and improve the quality of life for those workers. But let me just say, it's about the workers, but it's really about how we all benefit as a city, because when we improve the benefits and life of workers, we improve our economy. And we all benefit from a stronger economy, especially right now.
Rosa, you started working for the city more than 30 years ago. Has it been challenging navigating changes in leadership, especially as Chicago's mayors are known for their strong personalities?
Well, let me just say, and I think people find this interesting, but I don't think I've met a tougher boss than my mother. And she is a woman with, really, really strong will. And so I think that working for other mayors have been a complete a privilege for me to see the city transform. I mean, I started here in the late 80s, and look at Chicago today. You look at our city then and look at where we are today. This is the different mayors coming in and transforming our city, and really improving the quality of life of residents throughout our neighborhoods. And yes, do we have a lot more to do, more work to do? Absolutely. But I think every mayor has put in so much great work into making Chicago the great city it is today. This is why the labor protections that we have put in place since 2018, and even more to come, are just yet another way that we continue to improve our city to be even better than when I came into my job.
Now, Rosa, you originally planned to stay only for the first year of Mayor Lori Lightfoot's term, then the pandemic hit. How emotional was it to work with the city's businesses and workers over the past year and a half?
Yeah, so, it's been extremely difficult because of this personal, I always look at things from a very personal perspective. So in this job over the last 4 years, I've gotten to know many small business owners. I tell people we had a podcast where we would bring in business owners to tell their stories so that other small business owners can learn from those stories. And so through this time, I've gotten to know so many individual stories, knowing that many of those businesses were calling me directly, struggling, knowing that their life's earnings were about to be lost during this entire, 16 months, really. And so it's been extremely difficult. But I've also learned something about entrepreneurs, is that they are so vibrant, that they don't give up easily. They are fighters. So I know Chicago's economy is going to be even greater than we were before the pandemic, because they are about the fight. They are about following that dream and not letting go. And so, yes, very emotional, but I also have so much confidence in that entrepreneurial spirit. And Chicago is a mecca for business. And so we need to make sure that we continue to foster and support our entrepreneurs, especially the small ones, because it's through those small ones that they grow. And I know you know this, Michael, that the majority of job creation across our country, and of course in our city, is through those small business owners. They're the ones that employ the majority of employers across our city.
Rosa, we just got about 30 seconds left. What are you going to miss most about working for the city?
I think it's that personal, bringing that services and improving quality of life in neighborhoods and people. We have an opportunity to make a direct impact. So I'm going to miss that, but I definitely want to be an active participant in the growth of our city.
Our thanks to Rosa Escarino.
Thank you.
Back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/daily briefing and sign up.
As people begin to emerge after months of isolation, many are considering new career opportunities, but feel unsure about where to begin. Arts correspondent Angel Edo shares more on how a local entrepreneur is using a creative take on vision boarding to help people figure out the first or next step in starting a business, all while preserving an art form she's personally passionate about.
For creative entrepreneur Karen Spears, it all began with a love for handwriting.
Over the years, over my life, I've always been told that I should sell my handwriting. But it wasn't until high school when I really got my first taste in doing that. So I sold quote canvases.
As she picked up graphic design skills to digitize her handwriting, Spears' side hustle grew. And after a few years, she decided to build brands creatively on a full-time basis, creating her business Character.
I didn't take the traditional path in, getting a career and going to a 9-to-5, but really wanted to see what entrepreneurship had to offer. And I'm a creative in the intersection of being super creative, but also loving the process of building something and starting something new. And that's how character was born, out of the love for wanting to see other people's ideas come into fruition through that creative brainstorming process.
Now, Spears used this love to create a new tool during the pandemic that she found helped people who might have been feeling unmotivated.
We held 90-minute mind mapping sessions to get people unstuck and to really help them discover creative possibility in a time that felt very bleak. And so mind mapping was a great way to also introduce creative ideas for our clients. They would see my screen and I would have my iPad in front of me and they would see their ideas coming to life. And that proved to be a game changer.
So how exactly does mind mapping work? It begins with a brain dump with any and every question, affirmation, or as Spears calls them, power quote on your mind. Then it's time to hit the map. These ideas are then categorized by questions that Spears works to help clients find answers to.
So let's say if we wrote down, my mood is anxious. I am anxious because I don't know where to start on my business. Now you have a, tangible question that you can find an answer to, which leads us into the final part of our first phase of the map, which is exploring the possibilities.
Those possibilities are then explored on the final map, which is broken up into 3 phases to help clients stay on track with their goals. This method has proven to be successful for brands Spears and her team have worked with.
Through that creative brainstorming process, they were able to now visualize how they can talk about themselves to make them different from other competitors in the space.
Now, as Spears looks ahead at how she can use this creative style to help people pursue their passion, she has 2 goals in mind.
Being, a founder, especially as a Black woman, under 25, right? Like, it's this part of me that really wants to see how I can impact younger generations and really show them that there's a path that they can pursue that isn't traditional. They don't teach handwriting in schools anymore. Everyone's given an iPad. So it's like, okay, well, what happens to this art form that is handwriting? And my goal is to preserve that art form, no matter how beautiful or messy your handwriting may be. Handwriting is something that everyone has, and, we can keep it alive, and mind mapping is just another way to do that.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
And Karen Spears will begin Character Academy this fall, a more in-depth mind mapping workshop for like-minded creative entrepreneurs. And we have more information about that on our website.
Very interesting.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news.
Always just so eager to read that line. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. As the number of COVID cases increase, a growing call for pregnant people to get vaccinated. What do doctors recommend?
And a bike program on the southeast side aims to raise awareness about transit barriers in the community area. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great night.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors. Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm named on the 2021 expertise list of the best personal injury attorneys in Chicago.